Welcome to my channel. This is an indication of some of the things that I cover on a regular basis in my videos. If you haven't already subscribed, please feel free to do so, and don't forget to click the little bell so that you'll get notified of future videos. Please feel free to share my videos on your social media, and I hope you enjoy the video which follows. Well, hello everybody. After I mentioned in my last video about working on a couple of farms in Italy, I had a couple of requests to do sort of a travel video, I guess, a slideshow of some of the photographs that I took and explaining what the trip was like. So if looking at somebody's travel slides does not interest you, I would suggest that you ignore the next two videos. I worked with an organization called HelpX, or Help Exchange. If you Google Help Exchange, I think it's still in existence. People requiring or requesting work to be done on their farms or whatever, they list themselves there and explain what their organization is and the kind of work that you would be doing or whatever. Members like myself, membership isn't very much. I no longer have a membership, but it's not very much money. In exchange for working a half day, about 5 days a week, they give you free room and board. I found it to be a great experience. I really enjoyed both places in Italy where I stayed. And I will divide these videos up. The first one will be my few days in Rome. I stayed there for 4 days just to get over the jet lag before I went to the first farm in Velletri. And then the second half of this same video will be my stay on the farm in Velletri. And I'll do a separate video of the farm in Tuscany. I have a lot more photographs, for one thing, from the farm in Tuscany, so it'll make the two videos roughly the same size, I guess, if I put two together on this one. So let's take a little look around Rome. What you've been looking at here, obviously, is the exterior of St. Peter's Basilica, taken at night. I took the train from the airport into Termini, which is the main rail station in central Rome, and from there I took the subway to, let me see, it's called Julius Caesar Street, the street with a little bed and breakfast that I was going to be staying at. I was exhausted, and I made it through to Termini fine. I got on the subway, and I didn't realize that I still had that thing hanging around my neck, one of these things on a chain or a string, whatever. It's like a pouch that you put your passport and all your travel documents in. I thought I'd taken that off. I wasn't aware that I was still had that hanging around my neck. All of a sudden, I was aware that somebody was trying to take my passport. He already had that unzipped and was trying to get the passport out of it, which is what alerted me. Well, I slapped him away and pushed him out of the way. A little man, shorter man, Italian, then lit into him and kept scolding him, and it would stop, and then he would start, and he would scold him again every once in a while. That went on until I got off at my stop. And I got thinking about it later on. I think they were a pair. They were both working together. The performance and the other guy was just so you wouldn't go calling police or whatever. But that was my welcome to Rome there. And I went on to the bed and breakfast, a lovely little place. And while you're seeing a couple of pictures here of the Vatican, it was only a 10-minute walk from the Vatican. So I will now give you a look at more of, in the daytime even, taken around the Vatican. I don't think I mentioned the date previously. It was February 25th, 2007 when I arrived in Rome. This is the beginning of day 2. I wanted to tour the Vatican Museum. On the, well, a very long lineup, hundreds of people, but it moved quite rapidly. I don't know, less than an hour getting to the ticket booth and getting inside. But you walk by this gate, and if you can read what's written on the gate, it's a bronze gate. I think it's the diplomatic gate. That would be the gate that visiting heads of state go through, like if the President of the United States or Her Majesty the Queen visit the Pope, they go through that gate in their cars, whatever. What interested me is the writing on the gate. I'm not sure if it's got Pope Benedict's name on it just because the gate was replaced when he was Pope, or do they replace it every time there's a new Pope? It gives the year of his pontificate beginning, all in Latin there, but the very first words are Benedictus in Latin. That's Benedict the 16th. And it gives the year as 2005 MMV. That's Roman numerals for 2005. So now I've got to go back to Rome, I guess, sometime and check and see if the gate now has Pope Francis on it. Well, I will now try to make some of the slides go by a little faster. I think about 10 seconds on each photograph. If you want to see something longer, you can just pause it rather, at that point. As I said, I'm now touring the Vatican Museum. This is very interesting spiral staircases inside of the museum. I like the photograph because of the blurred people, and then there's one guy there who stands out straight. This is just one of the ceilings in the many rooms that you walk through in the Vatican Museum. Next here is a sarcophagus. Don't think it was ever used by anybody, but I took the photograph because it's the rarest kind of marble, a red marble. Lots of Egyptian artifacts, including this mummy. I didn't take any photographs inside the Sistine Chapel. It was just so crowded, I was so disappointed in the number of people that were in there. It is, of course, breathtakingly beautiful. I was surprised at the size of the chapel. It is called a chapel, after all. It really isn't all that big. Looks smaller when you're there than what you see television footage from inside of there. And it was shoulder-to-shoulder people in there. There must have been 200 or 300 packed in. No place to sit down. There were benches along the sides of the walls, but they were all taken. And I don't know, I looked around as much as I felt I wanted to look around, and then I got out of there and went outside and back inside of the Basilica later on. What you've been looking at here is just one of the ceilings in another of the long, narrow galleries that you walk through while you're in the museum. Back outside now to see some more of the Vatican from the exterior. This is the view of St. Peter's from the street that's called Via della Costituzione. The only good thing that El Duce did for Italy, Mussolini. Prior to Mussolini, to approach the Vatican, you went through tiny little winding streets and you never had a perspective of it. He cleared out a lot of those buildings and made this long straight avenue going up towards St. Peter's and the piazza, the large square in front of St. Peter's. The second window in from the top floor there is that famous window that the Pope comes to every Wednesday and other special days as well to address the crowds. This is one of the Swiss Guards in their everyday uniform, not the traditional one that you see with supposedly was designed by Michelangelo. Or in the piazza again, looking in the daylight, looking at the Basilica. The Bernini colonnade, it's a series of columns in sort of like two arms that embrace the piazza. And when I walked from my bed and breakfast to the Vatican, I came in through the colonnade. Just more people walking in front of me, I guess, on their way to be a good tourist, the same as I was. Fountain in the piazza. There's two of those matching on either side of the piazza. Back inside, this is the papal altar, and those lamps that you see, oil lamps, surround what is called the crypt of the pallium. It's also where the relics of St. Peter are kept, down below the altar. And those bronze columns going up are Bernini's canopy over the altar. Looking up into the dome from inside, you can go up there, but I did not do it. I don't care for narrow staircases. Pope John the 23rd. This kind of disturbs me. He's been preserved in a glass case. They do tell you that the face is a wax mask, but supposedly the hands are him. Uh, One of the reasons, or one of the proofs for canonization, was that his body was found incorruptible when the tomb was opened, and his doctor immediately gave a press conference. He was still alive at the time. He said, "I'm not surprised that his body is still incorruptible because I embalmed him." Michelangelo's Pieta, unfortunately now behind bulletproof glass. A year or two before I went there, some lunatic attacked it with a hammer, so they've now got it protected by bulletproof glass. And this is Castle Sant'Angelo. And you go down the Via della Constiglione to the end, and that's it's a papal palace, I believe still belongs to the Vatican. There was, or maybe still is, a tunnel from the Vatican all the way to Castle Sant'Angelo. And a pope or several popes have taken refuge in there when the Vatican has been attacked hundreds of years ago. I spent 4 days in Rome. The idea was to get over the jet lag before I went to the first farm. This is the Spanish Steps, called the Spanish Steps because the Spanish diplomatic office to the Vatican is there, has been for hundreds of years, I guess. This is the Trevi Fountain, beautiful, and working this time. When I was in Rome once before, only been there twice, it was shut off, and there was two men with hip waders off in the water shoveling up buckets of coins. This is the fountain that you put your coins in for luck. You're supposed to throw them over your shoulder into the fountain. And people from all over the world do it by the hundreds every day. There's a little sign there that says that the coins for this particular week or month or whatever, the name of the charity that they're going to. But they were shoveling up big sacks of them. Another great thing about the Trevi is just across from it, directly across from it, is a tiny little gelato shop with the best ice cream, the best gelato in Italy. This is the column of Marcus Aurelius, and it is intricately carved in a spiral fashion from top to bottom, giving a historical record of all of his conquests. This is a building that fascinates me. This is the Pantheon, built by the Romans over 2,000 years ago. Have we built anything in the last 100 years that's going to be around 2,000 years from now? I doubt it. Inside now, instead of being dedicated to Roman gods, it's a Catholic chapel. Amazing how it has withstood the test of time. That is the oculus, a hole in the roof through which rain and sunlight both come, but it provides all of the light that's inside. And this is the light was shining on that side of the dome when I was there. It's just amazing. There's a gutter sort of in the floor that takes the water away when rain comes through. Series of pictures of the Colosseum. I have no nighttime pictures of the Colosseum. I didn't take any that really came out well enough that I would keep them. But I had an idea I wanted to go out to the Colosseum at night and take some photographs. So I took the subway out there, walked around for an hour or so taking photographs. And when I went back to the subway line that goes back to where I was living closes at a certain time and was no longer available. I was hours finding my way back. I finally found a taxi driver who could speak enough English that I got back to my bed and breakfast. Inside, they seem to be showing this bit of floor that they've added, perhaps to give you an idea of what it looked like back when it was in use. You can see the areas down below where the animals were kept and all that, but that would have been the entire surface would have been like that where the horrible performances took place. Outside, and this is the gladiators out for a smoke break. My advice would be to stay away from the gladiators if you actually go there sometime and they are about. They invite you over to get a photograph taken with them. Fine. Once you've had the photograph taken with them, they demand a lot of money to pay for it. I didn't go anywhere near them, but I saw some other tourists being harassed. The Arch of Constantine, the emperor who was credited with bringing Christianity to the Roman Empire, it was his mother who discovered several things. The tomb that is supposedly the tomb where Christ's body was laid was discovered by Constantine's mother. This is the Temple of Vesta. All of these things are close by the Colosseum. This is the palace and arch of Titus. Rome is full of ruins and not many green areas. But this is Circus Maximus, a large area where the Roman circus would have taken place. So it has been preserved, and it's just a large green field area. This is the tomb and monument of Victor Emmanuel II. He was the first king of unified Italy. This is sort of in central Rome, a beautiful, large structure. That concludes our visit to Rome. We'll now move on to the first farm that I worked on in Velletri, which is about an hour south of Rome by train. Well, I made good time from Rome down to Velletri. It's only about an hour by train. And the lady of the house, Paola, picked me up at the train station and took me to the farm. What we're looking at here is just a few shots that I took around the farm. I met all of the family that day. 3 children, Duncan, who was, I think, a 6-year-old, Kitty, his sister, who, I don't know, she might have been 10 or so, and Olivia, who was probably a senior in high school, and Paul, the father. He is Scottish and works for the United Nations in Rome, with an agency that promotes agriculture in developing countries. And of course, Paola, the lady of the house, who is a gourmet chef, no other way to put it. I'll do a little bit of describing later on of some of the meals that she served. Those mountains in the distance had some snow on them before I left. I was there for 3 weeks, and really enjoyed my stay. I was so surprised when I was given a small apartment to live in, with a balcony no less. I don't have any pictures of the interior, but I'll show you my balcony in a bit here. That's the town of Velletri in the distance. The farm itself is within the town limits. And one of my first jobs was weeding the garden to get it ready for summer. Not a working farm. It's going to be, or was, agritourism. Those are artichokes. And the apartment that I was in was for paying guests. If there had been any guests while I was there, I would have been moved across the hall into another room. I'll have to tell you a little bit about the artichokes. There's a story that goes along with this. I'm not sure how long the family had been there. Uh, they were still in the process of restoring the oak buildings and still doing some work on the gardens and yard and whatever. So I don't think they'd been there more than 3 or 4 years maybe. And the farmers and local people in the area, local farmers in particular, were not being very helpful. This bed of artichokes was there when they arrived, and there's always little pups, they call them, small artichoke plants that come up around the base, and she wanted me to expand the bed of artichokes, but she said the farmer next door said the time to do it is in the summer. And I just sort of gave her a strange look, and she said, "You don't agree with that, do you?" I said, "No, he's not being very helpful. In the heat of the summer, if you dug those up and transplanted them, there's no way they would survive. So my task was to start a new bed next to this one of artichokes once I got rid of all those weeds, and it did work very well. We watered them every day for maybe, I don't know, a week, 10 days before they finally took hold. But all of the transplants were successful, and I'm sure the following year she had twice as many artichokes. And she served artichokes, cacioffi in Italian, many different ways while I was there. Oh, she was a wonderful chef. I didn't have to do anything to the fig trees, but I thought I would show this just in case there are some people out there who don't understand how figs grow. I had a couple of fig trees that I grew in large containers, and then I transplanted them into my hoop house, and in the end I gave up. I never got much out of it. This is just not fig growing country. But the tree itself will start producing the figs even before the leaves come on. And that's one of the green figs there, and above it you can see where the leaves are just starting to open up. Unfortunately, I was not there for fig harvest. I love figs. In the days that followed, my first week there anyway, we visited a number of wonderful garden centers. I could have spent a fortune at any one of them. What did we buy? Rose bushes, bay laurel, and rosemary. I think some, oh yeah, I planted a flower garden too. They had a hedge of bay laurel that she wanted extended. The next door neighbor, who wasn't all that friendly anyway, had a very dirty looking chicken coop that she didn't want to look at. So I extended the hedge of bay laurel by about, I don't know, 20 feet or so, I guess. And I was sent out once when she was cooking to the garden to bring back some rosemary. And when I brought it back in, I said, it looks like rosemary, but it doesn't smell like it. I've always had the opinion that older rosemary shrubs are not as flavorful as the younger ones. And she said, well, I don't know about that. So when we were at the garden center, I found some rosemary and picked a piece off and took it to her. And she said, oh, yeah, you're right. That is much more fragrant than the older bushes that I have. So I made myself another job. I got to plant some rosemary plants for her. And that olive tree, the ancient olive tree for sale, you see those at a number of the garden centers over there. I suppose homesteads that are being torn down for something modern, and they salvage the olive trees. Evidently, an olive tree is almost impossible to kill. They dig it up, cut off most of the limbs, and all that smaller foliage that you see coming out there just sprouts out of it anyway. One of my jobs on the farm was to prune their olive trees, and that was what I was pruning off, was all of that new growth that was coming out around the trunk and things. You didn't want that to take away the strength of the tree from producing this year's olives. They would pick their own olives in the fall and take them to a cooperative where they would have them crushed, and the extra virgin olive oil they brought back. They had two huge canisters, stainless steel, like big milk cans that you used to see years ago, full of their own olive oil, and they got that much every year. This is Bella and Nutella, the two donkeys. And my job every morning before breakfast, I would go get Bella and Nutella and move them from their nighttime place where they had a shelter, a lean-to barn type thing, move them to a larger pasture. And this went on quite well for a couple of weeks. They also had a dog, a lovely dog. It would share oranges with me as I worked in the gardens. Um, but it liked to chase the donkeys, and the donkeys enjoyed it as much as the dog did. Uh, and the donkey would get in the dog would get in the pasture with the donkey and chase them around and round and round, and then the donkeys would get tired of that and they'd turn around and chase the dog round and round. Well, the dog was not supposed to be out early in the morning when I was moving the two donkeys to their pasture for the day, and one of the children must have opened the door and the dog came out, and I didn't know it was there. It came up behind me and barked and took off chasing the donkeys, which I had on leads, and I didn't dare let go because we weren't in the pasture yet, and there's a highway down below, and I was scared to death that the children's pet donkeys would be killed. It knocked me down and dragged me for quite a ways until finally I gave up and let go. Well, I did quite a bit of damage to my right knee. Very painful for a few days after that, and finally Paolo got me an appointment with a orthopedic surgeon out of Rome who was coming out to have a clinic in Velletri. I think it cost me €100 for the visit, but I was glad that I did it because I was concerned that I was going to have to cancel the rest of my trip and go home. But he did a thorough examination and said, no, there's nothing that you would need to cancel your trip over. It's not going to get any worse than it is, but you should definitely see your doctor when you get home. And I did. I required corrective surgery about a year later, but nevertheless, I was able to finish my trip. And the family here on the farm was called Chores. They were very concerned. They were scared to death, I think, that I was going to be suing them. And finally, I got them convinced, relax. It's something that could have happened to anybody. I'm not going to be suing anyone. I've sprained my knee, but I've recovered enough anyway that I finished my trip and went on to Tuscany. So that was a relief. Just a few pictures here taken around the farm, mostly of the house. The balcony that you see is the balcony to my apartment. I had a lovely little apartment, bedroom, living room area, a small kitchen, ensuite bathroom, and the balcony. Really, really nice. You see the window on the left there, the small window, and just outside of it is a lemon tree. Well, this next photo shows you that from inside the house. The window is in the kitchen. And one day I was in the kitchen watching Paola cook, and she opened the window and reached out and picked a lemon. How convenient is that? The brick that you see piled up outside, there were masons there working, laying a new courtyard between the house and I guess what was a barn, but they're restoring it and you hope to use it for their agritourism. And this is one side of the house with a sort of a veranda. Other view closer up of the same thing, I guess. The flowering shrubs was probably what interested me. Now, these are outbuildings. The one to the further left that's still got to be restored is a barn. I'm not sure what the one to the right was. But Paola wanted to turn it into a restaurant, and here is a story worth telling. She went to the town office or the planning office or whatever. That's just a staircase there going up to the second level, I guess, of the barn or whatever. But the bit of the door you can see on the right is the area that I'm talking about. She wanted to open a restaurant, and a restaurant by her, with her cooking, would have been very successful. She's an amazing cook. And when she got to the planning office, she said that she wanted to, apply to turn the building into a restaurant, to run a restaurant. And the man told her, oh, no, that's not necessary. You just go ahead and do it, and we'll do the paperwork afterward. And she looked at me and she said, I know what that means here. I said, I went back later to do the paperwork after having spent thousands of dollars on a restaurant. He would own half of it, or I could tear it back down, whichever I wanted to do. Hard to believe there was that kind of crooked activity going on, but she said nevertheless she gave up on her notion of a restaurant, at least for the time being. That's a view of the two buildings again, and that's probably taken, I guess, from my balcony. This is really something that's amazing. Every time they had company, they would cook steak and bruschetta. That's toast being toasted for the bruschetta. This grill is on the kitchen counter. It's in one corner of the kitchen counter in her kitchen. She start a fire in it and then rake the coals out under that grate, and she could cook both the steaks and the bruschetta on the grate, on the grill there with the hot coals below it. And very accommodating for me as a vegetarian. She said at one time she was almost a vegetarian herself, so she knew a lot of vegetarian cooking, but the guests would have steak. For me, she got a kind of cheese, and I wish I knew what it was, because now that I make my own cheese, I like to try it. thick slice of this cheese which had been smoked, but you could grill it, and it didn't melt. It got soft inside, but the exterior stayed quite solid. It was delicious. I had it twice at least. You can see Paola's hand there, but I cut the picture of her out of the picture. I don't have permission to show the family and didn't want to contact them and ask for that permission, so I thought it would be prudent not to show people that I don't have permission to use in my video here. I will keep this photo here for a few minutes while I tell a little story of some of the things that I did while I was there. I took with me a gift for both of the farms of Canadian maple syrup and an Aboriginal thing from Canada or from North America, the Aboriginal tribes of North America, called a dream catcher. And anyway, I was asked in Velletri to make Canadian pancakes to go along with the maple syrup, so I made pancakes for breakfast there one day. And then another time I was asked to cook an evening meal that would be something that they would not have had, something that was traditional from back home. And I've been in a market and found salt codfish, so I soaked the salt codfish and got most of the salt out of it and made fish cakes, and they were very well received. And I also made strawberry shortcakes. There were lots of fresh strawberries available. They weren't coming yet from the local area, but they were Italian. They were coming up from Sicily, and we'd been eating them, so I made shortcakes. They didn't know what a shortcake was. I didn't have a cookbook with me, of course, so I went online and found a recipe for shortcakes. More like a scone if you also don't know what a shortcake is. And I baked them, the best looking ones I have ever made, and I lay that to the type of flour. Their flour is called 00, which means it's very finely milled. They rose higher than anything I'd ever made before. And then you macerate strawberries. You put the sugar on strawberries and leave them at room temperature while they develop a juice. And the dessert is you split one of these scone-like things and put the strawberries over it, put the top back on, the other half of it, and then put whipped cream on top of that. Well, they were very popular, very well received. The next day, I had been out working in the yard doing something, and I came in the house, and Paola's sister was visiting, and they were having shortcakes and tea or coffee or something. And before I left, Paola said, I have a confession to make. And I said, oh, what's that? She said, I had two at dinner. I got up in the night and had a third one. So that was the ultimate compliment on my strawberry shortcakes. I also made them at the next farm in Tuscany. Strange that these people wanted me to do some cooking while I was there, but they were well enjoyed anyway. Went into the town of Velletri with the family to partake in the annual Gardenia Festival. Velletri is known as the Gardenia capital of the world, I guess. I did some walking around first. This is Padre Pio, now Saint Padre Pio, I guess. He suffered from the stigmata. He bled from the traditional wounds of Christ. And depending on who you talk to, the church believed it evidently, but a lot of the people who actually knew him said it was a fake. That's a view of Velletri as you approach the town, and the tower in the middle is the bell tower. I've been looking at it from the farm and wanted to get closer to it, so I did some research and found it once I got there. Very interesting little town. The Appian Way, the old Roman highway from wherever to Rome, goes through Velletri. It was getting close to Easter, and that was a couple of chocolate Easter eggs being displayed in a candy shop window. Just one of the fountains at an intersection or a roundabout. They tend to put fountains at roundabouts. It was more like a country fair like we would have here. There were booths everywhere, people selling various things and food and all sorts of produce and plants. They were selling lots of garden plants because it was springtime. And of course, the flower of the hour. I took a couple of photos of them. They smell so nice. There's a white one coming up here, I think, yeah. Just starting to open. There was all sizes of the plants in bloom. Some like 10 feet tall. You could instant flower garden in your garden. That's an area where the plants were for sale. I really found this interesting. There was a demonstration of carving, and a squash or a pumpkin. I'm not quite sure what it was, but I stood there and watched it for a long time. The man was really, really talented. Back at the farm, a few days before I left, they had snow in Rome. We didn't get snow down in Velletri, but you could see some on the mountaintops. I took a walk, and this is a restored well and a lavoir. A lavoir, at least that's what they're called in France. I don't know what you call it in Italian. It's a place where the women of the town used to gather and wash the laundry, a communal outdoor laundry type thing. The only one I've seen in Italy. They probably have many more of them, but they're quite common in small French towns. I saw quite a few in Spain, too. They're restoring them now just as a historical artifact type thing, I guess. Nobody's going to use it any longer to do their laundry anyway. Quite a bit of work went into this. It was all done before I got there, but it's a large area of soil. Looked like they were going to plant a garden of some sort. I took a day trip to Naples, south of Velletri, down to Naples, the Bay of Naples, and you could see Mount Vesuvius. I'll show you that in a minute. A castle on the seashore. I had a very interesting experience, though. It was a Sunday morning. The sun was behind me. I could see my shadow ahead of me as I was walking along. And all of a sudden there was another shadow keeping pace with me behind me. I had a small backpack on my back, just a day pack, nothing much in it. I didn't feel anything, but I swung around, and it was a pickpocket. He was trying to get into my day pack to see what he could get. There wasn't anything in there worth stealing. But once again, I met another pickpocket. And this is an outdoor skating rink in Naples. I was surprised to see that. Must take a lot of energy to keep that frozen in the warm climate. And down on the seashore, the Bay of Naples, you look across to Vesuvius and Pompeii. I would like to have gone over to Pompeii, but I didn't have time. I was just there for a few hours, then had to take the train back up north again. I had a Neapolitan pizza, though. A man who threw it in the air and everything, just like you see in the movies. Well, that just about concludes the trip to Velletri in Rome. Thank you very much for watching. I will carry on with the last half of the trip in a video here in a week or so, hopefully.